Good morning. I've been dealing with something, I don't know, probably for a really long time now. And when I opened up my book this morning to read, it was like the answer to my prayers. And something told me that I just needed to share with you today. So, I, through my spiritual journey, have rejected a lot of everything that has been told to me because at some point in my life it did not serve me. I found it to be an insult to my soul. So I have found my own path. And across my journey, I came, this book was brought to my possession called Unto Thee I Grant. And this book was penned in 1350 to 1360 BC. So this is about a 3,300-year-old text. All right. And one of the most beautiful things I love to do, and you can do this with any book, is you just simply close your eyes and you ask, what is it that I most need to hear? And you open the book. And so today, we are going to be reading about the heaviness of heart. And if you haven't been with me as I read through this text, it is absolutely old language. It's a little bit hard to follow along with, but what I'm going to do is interpret it for you as we go along. And because this one's a little bit longer and it takes a little bit longer to read, I'm not going to read it all the way through. First, I'm just going to read it and then interpret it as we go along. Now, the other thing is, too, is that interpretation is personal, all right? So when I give you interpretations, I'm trying to just transform it from the old English into new English without losing some of the translation or the essence of the writing. And it can be a little bit difficult because of the text that it's written in, the language it's written in was translated from some other language into English. And so this is the only English translation there is, which is really amazing. So, heaviness of heart. The soul of the cheerful forceth a smile upon the face of affliction, but the despondence of the sad deadeneth even the brightest of joy. So it's saying that a cheerful, somebody who's cheerful can, bring a smile to somebody else's face, but somebody who's really sad can deaden even the brightest of joy. And we've all experienced that, right? We've been in a really good mood, and then maybe we're trying to share something with somebody and then they totally rain on our parade, right? Even though we're super excited about this thing, they're just feeling some sort of way, and it's palpable, it's communicable, it absolutely will rain on your parade, right? What is the source of sadness but feebleness of the mind? I got a little irritated when I read that. I'm like, oh, so I'm sad just because my mind is weak? Like, fuck off, What giveth it power but the want of reason? So the source of sadness is, its power is the want of reason. Like, it wants a reason to be sad, right? A reason for sadness. Rouse thyself to combat, and she quitteth the field before thou strikest. So when you just stand up to fight this sadness, then the sadness goes away. There isn't anything to fight. When you stand up and go, I'm not going to be sad anymore, the sadness doesn't have anything to fight back, okay? Because there isn't any reason for the sadness, okay? So when we're talking heaviness of heart, this is that long melancholy and the infinite sadness, these things that we carry about us that we feel like have dampened us and we can't quite recover for them, okay? She is an enemy to thy race, therefore drive her from thy heart. She poisoneth the sweets of thy life, therefore suffer her not to enter thy dwelling. So they're referring to sadness as she, and, she's just an enemy. She poisons everything in your life, and the best thing to do is just not let it in, right? But we've already have, right? We've been carrying this sadness, this heaviness in our hearts for so long that we're just trying to deal with it. But we don't have to deal with it. We don't have to cope with it either. Life is not about dealing with, coping with, or managing things. We're here to live, but life brings us shit that really weighs us down. She raises the loss of a straw to the destruction of thy fortune. While she vexes thy mind about trifles, she robbeth thee of thine attention to the things of consequence. Behold, she but prophesieth what she seemeth to relate unto thee. So sadness is the one that she's a straw that breaks the camel's back, right? The straw of destruction of thy fortune. It just takes a little bit. It doesn't have to be a whole lot of sadness. It's just one little thing that we carry with us on, and eventually we just carry the sadness, and the event itself is just kind of dissipated, or maybe it's transformed, and there's not just one thing that we can think of. There's lots of things that make us sad, right? She's making us think about all of these things, right? She vexes thy mind about trifles, so she gives you all these things to think about, and she robs you of your attention to the things that need to get done around you, the things that are actually, tangible, physical, you're able to touch it and do something about it. Those things are going left untouched and unaddressed because you're too busy entertaining what's going on in your mind. But she seems so real, and so this text moves it from a responsibility of just you having this thing going on in your mind to it being like an assault, like something that is infiltrating you that doesn't need to belong there, right? And the last part of this is really, really, man, it hit me. Behold, she but prophesieth what she seemeth to relate unto thee. So the things that sadness tells you seem to come true. They seem to be prophesied, right? But it's not that there is a prophecy there. It's a manipulation to make you think that there is a prophecy. This is supposed to happen, but it's actually just like somebody playing a prank on you, right? Like they're misleading you intentionally because they've got some sort of other agenda. And unlike a prank, this one, like there's no joy in it for you, right? So she spreadeth drowsiness as a veil over thy virtues. So sadness is going to make you sad and tired. And it's going to put a veil over your virtues, which means the things that you want to do, you're not going to be able to see them as clearly, okay? Because, well, you're tired, you're sad, you've got all of these things going on, all of these things that are in front of you that are preventing you from seeing these things that really need to get done. She hideth them from those who would honor thee on beholding them. And she entangleth and keepeth them down, while she make it most necessary for thee to exert them. So, she hides your virtues from you, even though you would honor them and really embrace them and live them. And she keeps them down and away from you like that, but you still have a need to exercise them, to attain them, to become them. These virtues, it literally is a veil. It's like, I don't think I got close here, right? So like it's plastic bag. I mean, it's not even really all that, this was not even really all that see-through, is it? But it's causing you to not see things clearly, and then you have to exert so much more energy to do the things that you need to do because you're moving through this sadness, you're moving through this veil, but it's always in your way. No matter how much you try to move it out of your way, you just can't. It's like if you're standing behind a curtain and you're trying to find the exit to it, but you just never can, and you're just trying to, move the curtains. Eventually, you're just going to get so concerned about the curtains being in your way that you forgot, or it doesn't even become worth it anymore to get beyond the curtain, right? This is the heaviness of heart. This is the melancholy and the infinite sadness. This is the chest weight, all right? Lo, she oppresseth thee with evil, and she tieth down thy hands when they would throw the load from off thee. All right, so she's bringing in all of these things that keep you sad, and it refers to them as evil, but it's not necessarily like evil. It's just anything that stops you from doing the things that are really in your highest and best, okay? And she literally just like prevents you from being able to like throw the load off of your back. It's like you're carrying a big old backpack, but the weight is so heavy you want to put it down, but she's tied you up that you don't even remember that you can, right? So you just keep carrying this heaviness. If thou wouldst avoid what is base, if thou wouldst disdain what is cowardly, if thou wouldst drive from thy heart what is unjust, suffer not sadness to lay hold upon it. So, let's see, if thou would avoid what is base. So that seems to be like the very, maybe like the foundational factors without taking into consideration the variables. It's like, I don't know, putting a meal on a plate and the plate's broken, right? You can't really, no matter how good the meal is, like if the plate is broken, as soon as you pick it up, it just all goes everywhere, right? And then you can't actually enjoy the meal because now there's pieces of plate in there, like glass and all of that, right? So, let's see, where were we? And, so basically, like all of these things, avoid what is base, disdain what is cowardly, and drive from the heart which is unjust. These are the things that sadness holds on to that then lead us into this heaviness of heart. So you'll have days where you're clear-minded and you can see, you can feel, you can understand everything, but then something happens, right? Something of that sadness happens, and all of a sudden you're holding on to it all again, and that gives more like that sets the foundation for the sadness to come back in and for it to make a home again. All right, so let's see. Suffer it not to cover itself with the face of piety, let it not deceive thee with the show of wisdom. So what this is saying is that sometimes we think that suffering is righteousness, we think suffering is virtuous, we think suffering is wisdom, and it's really not, right? It is just another way that it deceives us by pretending to be wisdom. Yes, there's absolutely things that we can learn from them, but if we're feeling that place of sadness, then we are just lying to ourselves from that place. We're just making up a whole sorts of slew of reasons. It's still sadness. Just because it sounds a little bit different doesn't mean that it's not there, doesn't mean that it's not doing these things to oppress you. Religion, pay honor to thy maker, let it not be clouded with melancholy. So back, let's see, wisdom maketh thee happy, know then that sorrow is to her looks a stranger. So when this book was written in 3,300 years ago, there were religions in the world that, and religion was a much different thing back then. It wasn't this choice of things, it really was embodied as like the truth and the way of life. And so what it says here is that religion, which is really just a spiritual practice, back then they had rituals and routines and things that they did regularly in order to, pay honor to thy maker. So what it's saying here is that don't let whatever that spiritual practice is be clouded with melancholy. And this one can be a little bit difficult because when we go into prayer and we go in to talk to God and to see, like, I don't know, what's there or whatever, like, it can be really hard to not be sad. So I'm going to add something to that to say that you can start with that melancholy because that's where you are, but you have to understand that you can't hold on to that and then fully accept the love and support of your creator, because that melancholy, that sadness is in the way, right? So there's only so much that you can receive, and but being willing to receive that's that faith, a grain of a mustard seed, like you allow the doorway to open just a little bit and it can open more and more and more and more and more, right? And so eventually you stick with it long enough and you're fully willing to surrender all of that, even if you don't know how, and eventually it'll shift in there. So don't be discouraged when you're sad about going to your Creator and talking uh, to God and seeing what God has to say to you. The only thing is, though, is that when you're sad, you can't hear the answers clearly. A lot of times you're just not going to be able to hear anything at all or feel anything at all, and it's going to feel like God doesn't answer, and it's not because God isn't answering. It's because this veil is in this way, the sadness is in the way, and you literally can't see, hear, or feel the response because the sadness has literally numbed and deadened your receptors for that, okay? This last part, wisdom maketh thee happy. Know then that sorrow is to her looks a stranger. So when wisdom, which is going into that prayer and relinquishing all of that to your Creator in order for the exchange of happiness, and it's not that the problems go away, it's that there's a new understanding here. This is where that wisdom comes in. And then to wisdom, sorrow looks a stranger. So when you're living in that wisdom and you're embracing the truth that you know, you can't be sad in that same moment. If you get sad, it's not at the same time that you're in that wisdom mode. It's you might just kind of like flip back to it, and then you go, oh yeah, but wisdom, and you go back and forth, and eventually you get really good at it, and this up and down becomes more of an in between because you're going between them so fast. It just looks like a static, stable force. But in reality, it's not that you have avoided any sadness, because if you avoid the sadness, you also have to avoid the joy. It's that you have the wisdom to understand that these things are necessary part of life, and the wisdom to understand that you can always choose the happiness and the joy. Not that it's always easy. But that's what this practice is about. That's what our daily devotion is about. Okay? So for what should man be sorrowful but for afflictions? Why should his heart give up joy when the causes of it are not removed from him? Is it not this being miserable for the sake of misery? So it's saying, like, really, what should you be sorrowful about except for, like, afflictions in your life, right? I mean, that's really what the root of all sorrowness is afflictions. And why would you give up your joy when the cause of joy wasn't removed from you? So even though these afflictions and things may cause sorrow, like the things that are still joyful and causing of joy within you are still there. So why are we going to give up our joy when the things that are still bringing us joy are still there, right? Is this not misery for the sake of misery? Like, are you not being miserable just for the sake of being miserable? Like, you still have all these wonderful things around you, but you are refusing to look at them because you're sad. And so now all of a sudden the things that were wonderful and bring you joy now all of a sudden can't. And the thing is that by the time that you realize this, and maybe by the time that you're watching this, like, you've been in that sorrowful, sad, melancholia state for a really long time. And so it's like, wait a second, those things were joyful to me and I let them go. Don't barrage yourself and be negative about it. It's that there are still things in your present day, like right now, that can bring you joy. Like, even just as simple as things like my ceiling fan going on, right? Well, what is a ceiling fan's purpose? Well, it's to keep me cool, right? And it's doing its job. It's actually perfect. So can I not be grateful for that? Or is it just too mundane of a thing? Is it really too mundane of a thing? Or is it just a mundane thing because I'm sad? Because I have this sorrow and this heaviness of my heart that it can't appreciate the air that the fan is providing for me because it's just a simple everyday thing? Well, there's lots of simple everyday things, right? So, funny, I tried to scroll my page up in my book by, like a screen. Okay, as the mourner who looketh sad because he is hired to do so, who weepeth because his tears are paid for, such is the man who suffereth his heart to be sad, not because he suffereth aught, but because he is gloomy. And aught was a new word I learned today, which means anything at all. So, let's see. As a mourner who looks sad because he's hired to be sad, his tears are paid for. He's not actually a sad being. He's just crying because he's paid to be at this funeral, right? So is the man who suffers his heart to be sad, not because he suffers anything, but because he is gloomy, right? So this perpetual sadness is just becomes like a paid production, because there's really nothing, any one thing that's happening. It's just a everything sort of thing, right? And it is not the occasion that produces the sorrow, for behold, the same thing shall be to another rejoicing. So this is saying that it's not the occasion but your perspective on it that causes you pain or joy, right? Because two people can experience the very same thing, and one person can have a very negative response to it, and another one can have a very positive one. For example, when I was 15, was in a really nasty car accident, and I was sitting in shotgun, and I tried to undo my seatbelt. It was one of those automatic seatbelts that came up, and it just would not undo. And no matter how I tried to get it undone, it just would not. We were in a two-door car. It was like one of those little Geo Metros, a really little roller skate type of car. And we were hit twice. When the car went out to the intersection, we went from a side street into a major road. We got hit on the front driver's side, and we were spun around and then got hit on the back driver's side. And then we spun around and everything stopped, and everything was done, right? So we got hit twice, and both impacts were on the driver's side of the car, the opposite side of the car for me. I blacked out. I ended up with a little bit of bruises on my knees, maybe some whiplash. And when I blacked out, I felt like I had some insulation around me. When the car accident was over, everybody started getting out of the car, but there was one person in the car who did not get out. And by the time, things were going on, and they had taken me away, and I found out later that the girl who was sitting behind the driver's side, she'd taken the brunt of the impact, right? Or at least one of them, and she broke everything down the left side of her body, everything. So in that experience, her and I had something completely different come out of it, because to her, God hates her and smited her and, ruined her life because she got in a car accident and all of these things. And for me, I was in that car accident too, and I did not suffer the same things that she did, but I felt the same way that she did for a long while, and I didn't understand. It wasn't until later I learned about everything that had happened to her that I realized that, wow, that was a really shitty thing to happen to me, but fuck, was I divinely supported, loved? And I'm sure she was too. She's still alive. She has a story. I don't know where she is. It's been 20 years. But, it changed everything for me. And as I went on my journey, it still even gets me worked up. The insulation and things that I felt was absolutely Archangel Michael. I had future experiences with him years later, where then I realized, oh my God, that was Michael. He revealed himself to me in some other future situations. When I went back, I went, oh my God, that's the same person that was there. And I didn't know it. I had no idea. He wouldn't let me take my seatbelt off, because I would have gone right out the window. We were hit that hard, and just the way the impact, I would have just at least hit my head or something. So we never know, right? And maybe that's her, maybe the other girl, maybe she's still holding on to stuff from this. Maybe this will help her too. Who knows? But everything is up for interpretation. Everything is perspective. And if we can gain that perspective rather quickly from a situation, rather than letting it go on and fester and years go by, and then we have this melancholy and heaviness of the heart that we can't seem to get rid of. Here my kids clearing some of their stuff. So we got a few more pages, so I might not be able to make it as long or take as much time here, depending on what the action goes out there, right? But this is another thing. This is actually a really good something that just inclined to share with you. When you're moving energy like this, and this is what we're doing, by the way, I might be reading from a book and giving you my interpretation, but we're moving and shifting a lot of energy as we're doing it. And our physical reality is going to respond to that. And it might be something as quickly as your children losing their minds, as you're having some sort of emotional thing, right? But you saw me, I'm crying, I'm having feelings, and all of a sudden my children are getting loud. I don't know if you can even hear them or what, but this is part of it. I'm releasing things that I've held stuck to, and it's going to have some sort of manifestation. And it doesn't have to be a very big thing or even a noticeable thing, right? But that is just a way for you to recognize that things are shifting. And instead of, listen, even my throat's getting all clear. And instead of me, like, stopping what I'm doing to go handle that, like, I already know what's going on out there. They're just brothers. They're having, the issues that brothers have. They're 17 months apart. You know what I mean? They really need me, they'll come get me. So I'm going to continue rather than allowing that to distract me and pull me away from what I want to do here for you, which will cause me more sadness, right? So let's see. Ask men if their sadness maketh things better, and themselves will confess to thee it is folly. Nay, they will praise him who beareth his ills with patience, who maketh head against misfortune with courage. Applause should be followed by imitation. So it says here that we'll all acknowledge our sadness isn't making anything better, and actually it's probably making, things worse and probably messing us up. Of course it is, right? And we, those of us that are sad, praise the person who can bear his ills with patience, who makes head against misfortune with courage. Basically, he's facing all of his stuff head on, and it doesn't seem to lose any footing. And while we applaud for them and we're like, wow, that's really awesome, well, then we should try to imitate them. And in that, we will find our own way to move through it. It's not that this person is doing it exactly the way that we need to, but they are setting an example that we can then follow and find our own way through. Sadness is against nature, for it troubleth her motions. Lo, it rendereth distasteful whatsoever she hath made amiable. Sadness is part of the cycle, right? So we can't get away from it, because if we weren't supposed to experience sadness, then we wouldn't be sad. The thing is that we cannot hold on to it and live with sadness as our foundation, with sadness as our base. We've got to, just honor it for the cycle that it is. And it is part of nature to allow those things to flow. It stops nature, it's against nature to hold on to those things, which is why it eventually causes us so much pain, because we weren't supposed to hold on to it in the first place, right? But we're learning, right? Like, we weren't ever taught by the people before us. Like, they don't know what to do. They're all holding on to their shit too. That's how we learned. So, as the oak falleth before the tempest, and raiseth not its head again, so boweth the heart of man to the force of sadness, and so returneth it unto its strength no more. What that means is what I just said about understanding that it's a cycle and surrendering to that cycle. And when it is done, it will fall as a dead tree, never to be resurrected again. And it doesn't mean that things aren't going to come back into your life, that sadness may come up again, but what it means is that you'll recognize sadness for what it is, and instead of holding on to it, you'll do what's necessary to honor the cycle and move through it, right? Until the tree falls dead against the ground, never to be raised again. As the snow melteth upon the mountains from the rain that trickleth down their sides, even so is beauty washed from the cheeks by tears, and neither the one nor the other restoreth itself again forever. Things will never be the same, but it doesn't mean that they can't be just as beautiful or even more so. As the pearl is dissolved by the vinegar, which seemeth at first only to obscure its surface, so is thy happiness, O man, swallowed up by the heaviness of heart, though at first it seemeth only to cover its shadow. So eventually the sadness can just, totally dissolve and eat up that happiness, where we don't have it anymore, right? I think a lot of us are kind of at that spot. Well, obviously you are, you're still watching this, right? Me too, and understanding, I'll tell you, I fell into that wisdom trap for a while, just like, okay, well, my sorrow, like, I can still be here for other people, I can still present them things, and that's great, but without me totally feeling it within myself, they weren't able to feel it either. You can only communicate to somebody the depths of that which you feel in yourself, okay? So while there were lots of things wonderful that I was able to spread and to share with everybody, there were certain times where if I wasn't in that space, then there's just nothing that I could do. So what ended up happening to me is that I would spend all week just by myself and being depressed and all of that, just to muster up all the energy I could to teach my classes, to go, preach the sermon on Sunday because I was the pastor at the church. Like, it was like my whole show, right? And I didn't want to put on a show, so I didn't. Everything that I did was genuine, even if there were days when I was sad, but somehow I would show up to that church and I don't know, it would just be like somewhere along the way between my house and there, then all of that would be lifted because I made the choice to do that. And I didn't realize at the time that I needed to make that choice every single day, and that that's what would eventually lift me up out of it. I wasn't making the choice on a daily basis, and so there wasn't enough momentum to be gained from it because I wasn't being consistent. Does that make sense? So behold sadness in the public streets, cast thine eye upon her. Avoideth she not everyone, and doth not everyone fly from her presence? Right? It's the energy you carry about you. If you're sad, nobody's going to want to be around you. And sadness just naturally repels people except for other people who are sad. See how she droopeth her head like the flower whose root is cut asunder. See how she fixeth her eyes upon the earth. See how they serve her to no purpose but for weeping. So, more evidence of how you are only supporting the sadness when you're moving in that sadness and entertaining it, and just letting it be without the desire for more. All right? Is there in her mouth discourse? Is there in her heart the love of society? Is there in her mind reason? Ask her the cause, and she knoweth it not. Inquire the occasion, and behold, there is none. So, when you inquire in yourself to see what's going on with that sadness, you're not going to find any one particular answer. You're going to have like a whole bunch of things, or you're not even going to have anything at all within you. But it is going to sound like you. It is going to feel like you when you're inquiring. And so that's why you just kind of let it be, and why you're like, okay, well, whatever, I don't feel anything, and you just let it keep going because you think that that is you, it's part of you, and that you can't get rid of it. Yet doth her strength fail her, lo, at the length she sinketh into the grave, and no one saith what is become of her. Basically, like, eventually she'll lose her strength, and nobody's going to ask her where she went. Nobody's going to give a shit where sadness went. We're just all happy that it's gone. Hast thou understanding, and seest thou not this? Hast thou piety, and perceivest thou not thine error? Basically, like everything we've been talking about, like, are you understanding? Are you starting to get it? Like, are you willing to acknowledge that maybe you're not as like holy, godly, virtuous, righteous as you thought you were, and that there actually is an error in what you're doing? Ooh, somebody was like, read that again. Ooh. Are you seeing yourself so righteous and so virtuous that you're doing everything that you can, that you have blinded yourself to your own error? That one's powerful. That one was definitely for me. I don't know if that one was for you. I actually said that. I feel like I'm doing everything, but still something is missing, right? And one thing I always teach is frustration is missing pieces. So when you're frustrated, you're missing pieces, and frustration can translate into other things and link on to other negative energies, because that's just how it is. Energy attracts like energy. So God created thee in mercy. Had he not intended thee to be happy, his beneficence would not have called thee into existence. How darest thou then to fly in the face of his majesty? So it's saying God didn't put you here to be miserable. God put you here to be happy and to experience all of these things. And how dare you think that it be otherwise? Whilst thou art most happy with innocence, thou dost him most honor. Remember when we were kids and we were just happy about everything that happened? You know, like even the bad stuff or whatever, it was just kind of whatever. We were just looking forward to, the lunchroom or reading, our favorite book or, whatever it was. And what is thy discontent but murmuring against him? It's like, I don't know if you have kids, but you give them something that's not quite exactly what they want and then they mumble under their breath. Well, that's kind of basically what it's saying we're doing with the Creator. We've got this wonderful world in front of us and the ability to create so much wonderful things, but we just don't. Created he not all things liable to changes, and darest thou to weep at their changing? It is the law. And this is another huge thing to understand, because when you are going through your spiritual journey and you're trying to decipher things, what is really true and divine about me? What is my innate nature, and what is the human condition? What has been taught to me? What is the humanness, right? So everything that is of God is changeable, right? So everything God creates can be changed. Everything man creates is static. This book is static. You can see it's falling apart, right? It was not created from the infinite source. It was created from a finite source of man, right? And so this is law, all right? No matter what it is, God is ever changing. Everything God creates, everything that is not man created, process, situation, whatever it is going to have the law of change about it, all right? And everything man created is going to stay static. And so this is how we can know what has been fed to us by our human experience through human means and what is actually divine within us, okay? If we know the law of nature, wherefore do we complain of it? Do you complain about gravity? My kid hates that one. But gravity is, right? No matter what you do, gravity is as gravity does. There are certain things, you get different materials that will interact with gravity differently, but gravity still is, regardless of the material. If we are ignorant of it, what should we accuse but our blindness to what every moment giveth us proof of? So if we're ignorant of it, then it's just our blindness that is giving us proof, or whatever proof we see in the moment. It's not that it's actually the proof in the moment, it's just that we're blinded to a point that we're only going to see the proof that supports where our sadness is going to keep us sad. Know that it is not thou that art to give laws to the world. Thy part is to harmonize with them as thou findest them. Your job isn't to create laws or try to decide what they are. Your job is to work with the laws when you discover them. Just like gravity. I mean, that's when we've all had our whole lives, right? We're learning to walk and we just keep falling over, right? Gravity, or we drop something, it falls. But eventually we learn how to figure it out, and we've just lived our entire lives now with gravity that you don't even think anything of it. You already know, you take gravity into account for everything that you're doing, right? If you are going down a flight of stairs, you have to account for gravity. If you don't step on each one of those stairs properly, you're going to eat shit. It just is. But when you are present, you walk down the flight of stairs fine, right? But when you are not present and you're off somewhere else, even something as simple as that, you get lost in, right? And you might miss a step or something because you are not being present. Your mind is wandering. Okay, so this is the same thing when it comes to this sadness, is that we let our minds wander, and at this point we're so used to the wandering mind finding this sadness and bringing it back to us that we don't even know where it comes from. It just comes up to the surface out of somewhere, and then we're stuck with it, and it's here, and then we think we can't get away from it. But really, it's just been that we have been lazy and not doing what we need to do for ourselves. And I know I just call it sadness laziness, right? But I can only say that because it's me too. I'm calling out myself here. All right. If they distress thee, the laws of nature, thy lamenting it but addeth to thy torment, right? Get mad at gravity, and you're just going to be even more pissed off. Be not deceived with fair pretenses, nor suppose that sorrow healeth misfortune. It is a poison under the color of a remedy, while it pretendeth to draw the arrow from thy breast, lo, it plungeth it into thine heart. So, thinking that sorrow is going to heal your misfortune actually is only going to make it worse. And anybody who's experienced something really catalytic in their life can attest to this. Like, it isn't until you choose to let go and to move through it that you really do. Otherwise, you just keep hurting yourself. You just keep stabbing yourself in the heart because you are deceived by fair pretenses. Things should have been this way. It should have, right? So, while sadness separateth thee from friends, doth it not say, thou art unfit for conversation? So your sorrow is going to pull you away from all the people who do love and support you, and not only is it going to pull you away, but it's going to make you think that you're not fit to have a conversation, that your sadness is going to bring them down. And it does, right? We know that. I mean, it even said that in the beginning of this, so it becomes really difficult in that moment when you really do need help, love, and support to reach out for it, because now you're being barraged with thoughts of thou art unfit for conversation, and so now hi honey. Can you give me like 5 or 10 more minutes?
Yeah, I found my Fortnite book.
Sweet. We'll read some in a little bit, okay? The sadness is going to tell you that you're unfit to have a conversation because of what it said at the beginning of the chapter, that sadness is going to bring other people down. But what it ended up doing to you was it robbed you of an opportunity to be loved and supported by others, because there's a moment where you have that, I want to be loved and supported, and when you are given that, when you allow yourself to receive it, then you can be loved and supported. And if you then listen to this thing that says thou art unfit for conversation because you're sad, you're going to give your sadness away to everybody else. What it does is it then shifts the energy to that being exactly what's going to happen. So if that comes up in our mind, we have to remind ourselves that, hey, no, that's not true, because you know what, I talked to this person when I was feeling some kind of way, and they absolutely loved me and received me so well. So why am I thinking that now? Exactly, emotional support. So sadness will tell you that you're unfit for conversation while it driveth thee into corners. So it's going to push you away, all the way into corner in your hiding space all by yourself. And does it not proclaim that it is ashamed of itself? So sadness is telling you that it's ashamed to be sad. It is not thy nature to meet the arrows of ill fortune unhurt. Okay, so you aren't supposed to make it through every painful situation unscathed, like it never happened. That's not the point. Nor doth reason require it of thee. You're not required to. It is thy duty to bear misfortune like a man, but thou must first also feel it like one. Now, this doesn't mean like a man, like, oh, I'm a manly man, go chop wood. That's not what it means. What it means is that you are it's your duty to bear misfortune like a man, to face it and to understand it and to acknowledge it and to accept it for what it is and to not fight it. Okay? That's what is meant, to bear misfortune like a man. You have to feel it and not run away from it. The trying to escape, trying to run away, to not look at it, think about it, talk about it, any of that is what's causing the problems. We've got to face these things head on. And tears may drop from thine eyes, though virtue falleth not from thine heart. Be thou careful only that there is cause, and that they flow not too abundantly. So there will be tears and that come about from these things, and it's important to honor them, but be mindful that you aren't letting them flow too abundantly and just allowing yourself to get back into that space of sadness, and that it's not actually tears processing the emotion, because those are two very different things. And you know what I'm talking about. You can't fool yourself. There's a crying that comes deep from within your soul, and it's in your heart. and you might even feel it in your gut, and it's like this total body retching, right? And then there's the sadness that isn't really in your heart. Like maybe it kind of is. Maybe it feels like it's kind of like on the top of it, but it's not really coming from within. It's just kind of like sitting on top. And I don't know about you, but I feel it like up in this space. And so it comes up here, and it just kind of overwhelms me at times, right? But that's the difference. And I do know it when I'm in those moments, like I don't know why I'm crying. Okay, that is a really good indication that you're just carrying around sadness about you that has been unresolved. And the thing is that we don't have to resolve these things. Yeah, it is almost in your throat. We don't have to resolve these things individually, every single particular circumstance, because at this point in time, we've had so many of them that trying to go through them and literally make you crazy. The greatness of evil is not to be reckoned from the number of tears shed for it. The greatest griefs are above these testimonials, as the greatest joys are beyond utterance. What is there that weakeneth the mind like grief? What depresseth it like sadness? Is the sorrowful prepared for noble enterprises, or armeth he himself in the cause of virtue? Subject not thyself to ills, where there are in return no advantages, neither sacrifice thou the means of good unto that which is in itself an evil. Most of that was pretty self-explanatory, but really just to sum those, several paragraphs up, he leaves us with a question, though, doesn't he? More questions than maybe answers. But my inner self is really not liking having to, work through. It's like, well, okay, we'll just lump them all together and just be done. Okay, well, then there's something in here for me, isn't that? So I'm going to read these things again. The greatest griefs are above these testimonials, as the greatest joys are beyond utterance. So we've got to accept that there are these equal, awful, or unpleasant experiences that are equal to the greatest joys, and we won't be able to explain them, and nor should we try. But it is the grief that weakens our mind and the sadness that depresses us. And how are we supposed to do anything from that place? How are we supposed to be, do these noble things and be so virtuous if we're always sad and we're always allowing the grief to weigh upon us? And so, it's funny because a lot of these chapters, they've got a lot of steps to them. And this one really, I think, asks a lot more questions and points out a lot more about what's already going on rather than providing solutions, right? Because really, according to this guy, we should just, stop being sad and just understand it is what it is and go on and be happy, right? But then in here he also says that you need to honor it, and that's the part I think that we miss, is that we don't fully honor it like we would something that is wonderful and amazing. We then try to get away from it, and we try to push it away from us, and then that makes it worse, right? And wow. That was the end of that chapter. What even started me here was just feeling that sadness. I've been dealing with that for a long while, and I know that I don't have to deal with it, right? But it's I know that my moving through it successfully is going to be able to help others, so I want to be able to fully understand it. And I know that once I get to the other side of it, once I do fully let all of it go, how am I supposed to understand it if I'm not in it, right? So I guess there's some part of me that really wants to understand this while I'm in it, which also causes me to stay in it a lot more and a lot longer. And so now I've got to make the choice to come out of it. I've learned everything that I can, and I just keep coming back to the same starting point. No matter what, I have so many journals and so many things written down from all of those things over the years that it's just a matter of me going through and being able to help myself and being willing to do that for me. And the other part is that it talked about in there is that you can't do anything of your own. You can't do it on your own. You've been trying, and that's why you're sad. That's why you're carrying the grief and you have the heavy heart, right? So we've got to relinquish the idea that we're going to be doing this by ourselves, because we of our own selves can do nothing, as evidenced by the way we've been living our lives. So we've got to hand this over all the time, every moment, but it's got to be feeling. And now the mistake that a lot of us make is that there's that despair that comes along with it, the grasping, the yearning, the longing, and that's the part that we've got to let go of. We've got to trust all of these things. We already know the truth. That was one thing that was the biggest thing in the, I don't know, I guess they're all big, right? I keep saying that. The law, like, is immutable. It's there, and once you realize that that's what's at play, then you just have to work with it. It's your job to harmonize with it, not to change it and make it your bitch. No, not at all. I mean, try to do that with a river. You know, I mean, you might be able to like capture some water in a glass, but then it's no longer the river anymore, right? Now it's just water in a glass. You can't change the river, but you can use the river to work for you, right? And so that's just what our daily efforting is. And once we really just surrender to the idea that we have that eternal divine guidance and support, and we really allow it to infiltrate our lives, that's when we get the help, and that's when we get the support, and that's when we feel like, even though we've been sad for so long, that, you know what, maybe I can let go of it. And it's going to be a daily thing. It's not just a, you know, one and done sort of thing. Eventually it will be. Eventually you'll get really good at shifting your energy, that it'll just be like, oh, all right. You know, you just make a choice in a moment, and everything about you backs that. It's not something that you have to think about for days or any of it. So I really hope that that was a wonderful, enlightening reading for you this morning. This ancient text, Unto Thee I Grant. Like I said, it was written in 1350 to 1360 BC. So it is... there's some absolute wisdom in there, but as with all texts, everything is up for personal interpretation. And whatever it is that you have felt within your being today that has given you goosebumps, that has given you an aha moment, that's for you, all right? And forget everything else. Just take the pieces that you need and work them into your life today and every day. And these are the things that you've been asking for. This is what you've been missing. You've been asking God for help, but it's these pieces, and we have to weave it in. It's like weaving a basket, right? God provides all the materials and the instructions and everything, but we're the ones that actually have to weave the basket, all right? And so these are your tools, but you need to use them every single day in order for them to make a difference, in order for you to reach that tipping point where it's just an automatic thing. You don't even think twice about it. It's just who you are. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks, Jess, for being here. And everybody else who's going to be watching this on the recording, join me in the Magical Club if you haven't already. We're just getting started over there. There's so many wonderful things that are on their way, and as I move through these things in myself, then the Magical Club just becomes more magical, because, well, that's how it works. All right, guys, I love you so much. Oh, and if you want to join me over there, it's join.themagical.club. All right, guys, love you.